Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It's always it's just as exciting for me, to educate on real estate. It's I'm just thankful for the service that you guys are providing to our community. Real estate is something that we don't talk about. It's something that our community is not as knowledgeable on, and Jane, you just killed it. I'm just in awe with the wealth of information you just provided. Even after 15 years of being in this business, I know I look like I'm 15, but I've been in this business for 15 years. That information is just incredible. I even pick up things, I learn new things. So thank you for that. Really thank you. Um, Real estate is, I grew up in the business. My fathers, my uncles were in the business, and I fell in love with the transactional side of real estate in about 2006. That's when I got in. 2006, 2007. I fell in love transacting, dealing with people, especially helping people in our community. It was just amazing. It was a great feeling. Now, I fell in love with the investing side of the business, real estate, in about 2013. And, I know a lot of people try to get in and buy a home and say, hey, I own a home and that's it. But the investing side, the acquisition of multiple properties, as Jane alluded to, you can have two, three, four, you can even have more properties. And I think sometimes in our community, we just think about real estate as just home ownership, right? And there's a lot more to it. Real estate is our schools, it's our church, it's our mosque, it's our grocery stores, you name it, it's all over, right? So whenever we're driving around and looking around, everything is real estate. And real estate ownership is the key. It's the key. I've seen it in my life to building wealth, generational wealth for that matter, because it's something that can always be passed on, right? There's this quote that I saw with Cornelius Vanderbilt, and is often quoted as him saying, any fool can make a fortune, but it takes a man of brains to hold on to it. And the truth is, if he had followed his own advice, it would have potentially protected him from his now vanished fortune, right? Like I don't know if you guys know, but the Vanderbilt wealth, would have rivaled like the John D family, Rockefeller family, because their net worth, as estimated in 2016, was about 11 billion. 11 billion. And does anybody know what was the difference with both families? The difference with the families is the Vanderbilt family squandered their wealth, their fortunes on depleting assets, wealth diminishing assets, cars, clothes, parties, all of those things, right? While the John D family, Rockefeller family, they parlayed their wealth into productive assets, income generating assets, which is obviously evidenced by their family holdings today. So it's certain that, ownership and investing has been the pathway for many wealthy families of the world today. And, it continues to build generational wealth. We just saw it even in this recent pandemic, 2020. What happened? COVID hits, everybody's scared, market is falling all over the place, everyone starts to panic. Stock market does what? Stock market tanks, right? However, real estate did what? It did the opposite. Jane can attest to it. We're in a market where we can't even keep up. A lot of mortgage brokers are burnt out. Realtors like myself were burnt out where, we're trying to keep our head above water. But that's the power of real estate. And one of the reasons that stock market tanked was because when there was uncertainty, people started to sell, people started to offload. With real estate, it's illiquid. It's not something that you can offload like that. Plus, people hold real estate for a long period of time. Okay, you have real estate can yield passive income, right? So, the beauty with it is the income generation part of it, right? When you own properties, whether you want to be hands-on, or have a property manager, or just even invest in REITs, the reality is you can sit back, continue your normal job, regular job, and still continue to have this income generating asset bring money in. There's the other side, which is the capital appreciation. So if you hold properties long enough, whether it's commercial, whether, you name it, multifamily, I always say with time, it will appreciate, right? I talked about the liquid side of things, so in markets where they're uncertain, volatile, you have real estate as a vehicle that, you lock up capital in it for long periods of time and it's safe. Another beauty about real estate is easily transferable, right? For your children, the wealthy, they set up trust accounts to hold their assets. And upon their death, the grantor, the ownership just transfers automatically, through their trust to children and all that, right? Sustainable, predictability. Real estate is a proven commodity. They may be down for a few years, but in the long term, it consistently appreciates and is cash flowing. So don't be worried. Trends will go up and down. In my career, I find a lot of people, I'll sit down in meetings, and when I ask people why they haven't purchased, there are two things I always hear. The first thing is always the down payment, as Jane talked about. People just can't, muster up or save up enough money to gather the down payment. In Toronto is even, it's farther reach now to save up this down payment. And then the second thing is fear. People are fearful of this thing called mortgage, that, if I get into a mortgage, am I able to, what if this happens? What if I lose my job? What if I do this and do that, And I say to people, look, if you look at the Maslow's theory of needs, the one thing that people will do everything, to stay alive is shelter. People would do everything in their power to keep a roof over their head. So if you're doing everything in your power to pay your landlord, why wouldn't you do that for your own asset? Think about that. Let's just let that sink in. People will go work all day, take 2-3 jobs just to pay for their rent, and are worried about owning an asset that belongs to them that they can pass on to their generation, their children. They're worried about it. And so those are typically what I hear, as barriers to getting into real estate home ownership. And it happens a lot in our community. I like a lot of things Jane said, even with our community, like the doctor example. That is classic. We see it all the time. It sounds very far-fetched to a lot of us in this group, but it happens. He said, I want to get back at them. That's why I'm not going to make the payment. That's ignorant. It's irresponsible. It's lack of knowledge. Thanks to people like Jane, professionals like her, they're able to give advice, give guidance, and that's why we're here. I did want to touch on this too. Does anyone know the percentage of Black real estate ownership in Canada? It said 73% of homeowners are white. 69% of rental residents belong to racialized minorities. 69%, typically in lower income brackets. It's mind blowing. And then there was the CTV. I don't know if you guys saw that, the CTV article, the Minister of Culture, Minister Hussein, he gave the article, highlighting the Fed's program to commit 10 million to help 200 Black families in the GTA to buy their first home. Now, whether this works or not, who knows? Only time will tell. But the reality is Black Canadians have higher housing needs. And we have low home ownership numbers, significantly lower than the average population. And we recognize that these are systemic issues that need to be addressed. This is one of the reasons why I get excited to be part of this. We need to talk to each other. We need to have this conversation. We need to educate ourselves because this is our children. This is our legacy. Real estate is just deeper than the acquisition of assets, right? There's another studies from the feds that talk about Black ownership, as one of the lowest in the country. And the data shows that 48% of Black population lived in a home that was owned by a household member in 2008, in comparison to the national home ownership rate of a population was, so the national home ownership rate was 73%. Look at that. So now we shift out of this pandemic from 2020. I believe in Ontario, we saw an appreciation of about 50 to 70% in some neighborhoods, but we couldn't partake in a lot of that wealth building. The last 2 years have been incredible in real estate. The amount of wealth that has been acquired is it's life-changing. I see people from Ontario that are finally able to get out of what we quote unquote call the rat race, because they're calling me, Wally J, now I can sell my house in Ontario and come over to Calgary and I'm rich. The burden, they can shake it off. My business, I was telling the gentleman yesterday that 30% of my business has become people transitioning from Ontario and other places in Canada. That's what real estate has afforded them. So the bottom line is it's socioeconomic and demographics differences are not enough to explain the discrepancies, right? It's simple. We know it is racial discrimination. So we can push all the policymakers, to do this and do that. But what we really need is this: education and execution. It's one thing for us to sit here and talk about do this and do that. But if we don't execute, we don't overcome this generational problem. It's huge. It's a big deal. I'm really passionate about speaking to this because we need to act. We need to have this conversation. We need to talk to each other, coach each other, educate each other, and hold each other accountable to execute on real estate acquisition and ownership. So since the Toronto market, is now out of reach, I have to put that shameful plug and say Calgary is the best option. I don't know if we saw the latest article that says Calgary has risen to number 3 in the Global Livability Index, our highest ranking ever. Okay? These accomplishments are reflecting our welcoming nature, its stability, our healthcare, our culture, environment, education. So I want to pivot and talk a bit about Calgary as a place to call home. I want to educate us on the market, how we're trending, where we're going, because this city, is ready to welcome, whoever is not here with open arms, to help shape the city's future. This is a place I call home. This is a place I grew up in. This is a place I love. And I'm seeing the transition happening, the migration happening. And, we're here with open arms to welcome everyone. We've seen Calgary shift over the recent years from a oil and gas primarily city to now we're focusing on green energy. There's a lot of startups that have been coming here. I think last I saw about 3,000 or so. There's a lot of venture capitalists, record money coming in here that are invested. Just Q1 of this year, a lot of money is coming into Calgary. So I see this city as a Toronto or Vancouver back then, right? Which can afford our community if we can just take that leap of faith, make the jump, right? And in 10 years from now, however long from now, we can pass this generational wealth, to our children. I'm going to talk a bit about the Calgary market here. So let me see if I can share my screen. Can everybody see?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, wonderful. So this is one of the reports I share every month to my VIP list. So if anyone is interested in the Calgary market, let me know and I'll put you on my VIP list. I'll share this with you monthly. So this is last month's numbers. And as you guys could see, we peaked in March. March is kind of where we saw our highest sales. And now we're starting to level out. And so even in leveling out, we can still see that activity is still higher than our 10-year average. It's still very strong. We're seeing 3% year over year in sales. The average price of housing here in Calgary, $546, which I don't even think can buy you a condo in I see some people shaking their heads. Which, it's up 14.5% year over year. Now look at detached homes. So the average detached home right now in Calgary is about 648 as of last month's numbers. It changes a bit here and there, which is only up 16%. Hence why I believe even at 16% in the next little while or in the next bit, we still have room to move and room to grow. What does that mean? Room to build more equity, room to build more wealth. Now, the duplex properties here on average 584, up 14.6%. Townhouses 363, up 16%, and apartment condos up 8.9%. So as we can see, our numbers are still relatively reasonable. Hence why I think the opportunity in Calgary is huge. All right. Now, when we look at the new listings, we're in a market now too where we're seeing activity pick up. New listings are down 5.9%. And then inventory levels, I think this is the same situation across Canada, but inventory levels are down all over, right? So we're down about 23%. And it's not that people are not putting their properties on the market, it's just when properties come on the market, the turnover is fast. If you look at a turnover here, this months of supply, which we call the absorption rate, it virtually means if no new property came on the market today, no new listing came on the market today, how long will it take for the existing inventory to be sold? Guys, it's less than 2 months. A couple of months ago, this was just about 1.5, if not under. So in less than 2 months, if no new property came to the market, all the existing inventory will be sold out, will be gone. That's a seller's market. That's a hot market. We have some pockets in Calgary that this number is under 1%. Under 1 month. And that's just to tell you how vibrant, how active this market is. I understand in Ontario, things are starting to correct a bit, but I do believe that we still have some room to push. I'm just gonna move right along here. I won't bore you guys with too much of the stats, but here in Calgary too, we have 8 quadrants, okay? Sorry, 8 zones. And this snapshot here just gives you all the different zones in the city, the average price point, and the appreciation year over year. So for any of us that are looking to invest in Calgary, relocate to Calgary, this gives you a pretty good understanding of, okay, which park, the price point at different zones. I'm now going to shift again. I want to talk about the buying process. Just give me a second here. So we've talked about how important it is to own real estate. We've talked about the market as a whole. Now we want to I want to touch on, I believe I still have some time, but I want to touch on the buying process and what it entails. So let's do that. Can we all see that?
Not yet.
Yeah, we are here with you.
Okay. Oh. Let's go. Let's try that again. We good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, wonderful. So for those of us, I love how Mr. Adebayo coined it, Liverpool, never walk alone. So Jane and I are like Batman and Robin, we're hand in hand. And I always say to any buyer or client that this is a big purchase. It's one of the most important purchases you'll ever make in your life. And far too often, we see people engage in a realtor. They say they want to buy a home. And the first thing the realtor does is jump into the car and just starts to show you properties. And for me, I just could never wrap my head around it. Because how do you help someone when you don't understand their needs? So whenever you engage with a realtor, I believe it's important to have an initial consultation. So I'm going to walk through my buying process, and whether it's me or another realtor, I think is important for you to expect this process. The biggest thing first is to get educated. You need to understand the wants and the needs and the timelines of your client in order to serve them appropriately. So when we meet with a real estate professional, we talk about what their needs are, what community, what are their timelines, just to gather as much as we can, make sure that they're comfortable, with the whole process. So always engage in an initial consultation, right? That's the first step. Also, what we try to achieve there is what we call a buyer agreement. So before I start to work with the client, I shared with them the services that I offer, my commitment to them, right? Things like confidentiality are things we'll discuss. Things like full disclosure is things we'll discuss. All my fiduciary duties to the client will be covered, okay? And then we also go into things like a FINTRAC form. FINTRAC form basically it's basically saying you are who you are, and it's there to protect money laundering, terrorism, things like that, right? So these are some of the things that we want to achieve with this consultation. It typically will last about 45 to an hour with me, because you'll have a lot of questions, I'll have questions, and then we'll walk through that process together. Now, the second step is where your mortgage specialist comes in. We have to get the pre-qualification. So guys will jump into the car and start showing a client properties. To me, that's like putting the cart before the horse. You must know what you qualify for, what you can afford, right? Your situation, your position, before going to put offers on property. And like Jane mentioned, even your negotiating advantage is assisted when you know what you can qualify for. So here just kind of highlights a lot of the things that one should go through these steps before we go out to look for a home. And also you want to make sure that you're aligned with your mortgage broker. They're educating you. Is it fixed? Is it variable? Interest rates? I mean, even payback, how much you can pay back on your loan. So, all of those things are important. It's not always the interest rates. A lot of people think I just need a broker that gives me the best interest rates, but there's a lot more, that comes in choosing, your broker, as Jane has alluded to. Now, the next step we go to in the buying process, once we have an idea of what you can qualify for, what you can afford, we start the search. Okay. Now we have a system, on the back end that helps me put in your criteria. And then when something comes up that matches your criteria, it will send you an email of the property right away. So we have a funnel process that basically will help you find the right home at the right price. So we will start, from my experience with a lot of clients, where we start is usually not where we finish. A lot of people will come to my office and say, hey, well, I want this, I want this, I want that, I want all the bells and all that. And, the reality is when it's all done, what they were asking for, once we start the journey, is not always where we end, right? So what I do is I keep the search pretty broad, depending on the client, especially if it's a first-time home buyer, and we start to narrow it down. It has been challenging, I'll be honest, in the last, few months, especially at the start of this year, Q1 of this year, because we didn't have any inventory. And so whenever people saw properties, all of the guidelines or all of the needs and assessment that worked for them, they threw it out the window. FOMO came into the picture. That's when you saw people putting in offers of 100,000 over list, 50, 80,000 over list. And so it's our job as real estate professionals to guide your emotions. It's our job to keep you in line. It's our job not to have you so in tune with your emotion that your decision is irrational. And, we saw that a lot this year, right? So we're starting to see the market here slow down a little bit. I would say level is the word. We're not correcting quite yet, but it is leveling out here. Now, so when we go out for the showings, I mean, we look at the properties, we schedule timelines to do all that. We're not only looking at Pillar 9 things on the MLS, we're looking at pocket listings. We're looking at for sale by owners. There's so many areas where one, could find homes. I've had clients that maybe their neighbor wants to sell, but I always say, even if it's your neighbor that wants to sell, make sure you use a qualified real estate professional, because there's so many other things that go into the home buying process than just the price itself. Now, shifting over, once we find that perfect home, right? We real estate professionals put what we call together a comparative market analysis. And what that does is it gives you a range of what the property is worth as of today, right? So we go back, we comb through properties, we look at the comparables, we're looking at location, we're looking at lot size, we're looking at the number of bedrooms, we're looking at the year the home was built, we're looking at the upgrades, things like that. So there's a lot of data that I'm combing through to make sure, that I'm arriving at a price that makes sense. Now, I share this market analysis with you. And the one thing I go over in my consultation is I guide the process, you make the choices. Decision is yours. So if I look at a property and say, look, this is the range in which we're most likely going to be able to get this property, and you say, well, you know what, Wally, no, let's put this price in there. I'll always be obedient. I'll never tell a client, I'll advise, but I'll never restrict a client from putting in an offer that seems unreasonable. My job is just to guide the process and educate you. Now, when we put in this offer, after, we have the comps and we put in the offer, there's a few things that go along with an offer, okay? The first thing is when we put in an offer, make sure you have your deposit. Your deposit has to be sitting in your account, because once an offer is accepted, right? We can't accept an offer just on paper. It has to, so monetary value has to go with it. Usually here it's about $5,000 to $10,000. Lately, I've been seeing it go even as high as $15,000 to $20,000 because people want to give themselves an edge to get the property. Another thing we look at, so you have your deposit, we put the offer in, we offer a price, then put in conditions. Common conditions are financing, home inspection, condo docs in the event that we're purchasing a condo. Now, the financing condition, we put that in place to protect you. I will not remove a financing condition until professionals like Jane tell me, hey, Wally, here's an email. Your client has been approved. Go ahead and remove that condition. Because once you remove that condition, the sale goes from conditionally sold to a firm sale. And at that point, if you decide to renege on the deal, 99.9% you lose your deposit, right? So as a real estate professional, I need to make sure that I'm protecting you every step along the way. A professional like Jane sends me an email. I get the email. I'm assured that, yes, you can go ahead and remove this, and then we're good to go. Property inspection condition. Usually with a home inspection, if it's not a brand new home, even with brand new homes, we typically expect there will be something. We have a professional as a part of the team that will go into the property and inspect it from A to Z to give you that peace of mind. In the event that there's anything that's concerning or alarming with the property, we can decide to either back off, we can decide to ask the homeowner to fix it, or we can decide to have them give us monetary compensation on it. So reduce the price of the property. So those are the three things that will normally happen. So once again, as a professional, I'm talking with the property inspector, I'm communicating with you, I'm saying, okay, these items, you're cosmetic, maybe, we can handle XYZ, but let's say we have significant roof issues. Foundation is sinking or cracking. Furnace concern, significant things, then we definitely need to bring those up and address them. Now, when we're comfortable with the outcome of the inspection, then we can waive the property inspection condition. Once we waive these conditions, then the property goes firm. At that point, it's pretty much sold. Let's go on to the next. So I pretty much touched on step 6, touched on step 7, touched on step 8. So once we go firm, now the condition date and the possession date are two different dates. Condition date is when we go firm. Possession date is actually when you move in. A lot of the times it could be a month from now, 2 months from now, right? Now, between then is when you're preparing, right? You've contacted your lawyer. You've started to change your mailing address. You started to prepare and do all of those things. Possession date will usually happen about at 12 noon of that day. I do say some possessions, sometimes there are delays. So if you're scheduling movers, cleaners, any of those people, make sure you give a little bit of time in between. I would say about, 2 to 3 hours in between. Okay. When you go to see your lawyer, make sure you also ask a lot of questions. Do I need title insurance? Do I not need it? Make sure you go there with your insurance, a void check. The lawyer too will present the statement of adjustment. In the event the seller has paid the property taxes, things like that, he will adjust all of that. The beautiful thing about Calgary, and I have to plug this in, is, we don't have, you called it what again, Jane, a land transfer tax? Yeah, so we don't have land transfer tax here. So these exorbitant closing cost amounts, you're not going to incur that in Calgary. You're not going to pay $120K for closing costs and those type of numbers. It's not going to happen. So once again, I'm welcoming everyone in this group to consider Calgary as a place to invest. We're here for you. We're here to guide you. The closing cost usually would be about 25 to about 5K here, roughly. That's what I typically see, depending on the transaction, right? Now, possession day is a day where I'm going to be meeting with you at the property. Standard practice will do a walkthrough prior to possession. So if there's any concerns or anything, I can advise the lawyer to either do a holdback or give him the thumbs up that, you know what, everything has checked out well and we're good to move forward. Okay. There is the day that we celebrate. I always have a gift, bottle of champagne. We pop champagne. We have a good time. I hand over the keys to you. Then a week after that, I will check on you and after sales service visit, just to make sure that the house is in, it's good shape. You don't have any concerns or anything like that. So that's the buyer process, from beginning to end, start to finish. There's a few things that I have in my presentation here to consider. So things like inspection fees be about 400 to 800. Condo docs, if we're purchasing a condo doc, if we're purchasing a condominium, there's what we call a condo doc review. Now, what these guys do is they will review reserve fund study, your budget, the operations, the board meetings, the bylaws. I mean, you name it, they will review everything just to make sure you're buying into a well-managed and healthy condominium building. They charge about 300 to 500, and I think it's money well spent because there is something we call special assessments. So some people will buy into a condo building, right, unknowingly that the roof needs to be replaced. And if there's not enough money in the reserve fund, guess what? They come knocking at your door and say, Mr. Owner, you have to cough up 20,000, 50,000, however much to cover the special assessment. So it's always important to make sure that you've reviewed the condo docs by a professional, right? Or, I know some accountants are really good at, reviewing it. However, be thorough with it and make sure that nothing comes to bite you in the future. Legal fees are usually about 900 to 1,400. Appraisals about 300 to 500 here. Sometimes it changes from bank to bank. Some banks will even cover the appraisal fee out here. So that's some cost savings there. When you're selling your home, we have something called a real property report. The real property report is an outline of your lot. In the event that when you purchased your home, you didn't have a fence, once you put a fence structure up, anything that's attached to the home, once that is completed, it alters the real property report, and then you need to do what we call an updated real property report, right? Oh, go back here. Then we have property insurance, and then the service charges, usually not much. Utilities. Moving costs, I think I have what is, okay, not more than $150 an hour, depending. Some people move by themselves, or they, call a moving company. But for the most part, these are things that we need to keep in mind when purchasing a home. I also will always share a checklist of things to do to gear you up once you're purchasing a home. But in a nutshell, that's the buying process from start to finish. I just wanted to touch on that. And if I think, yeah, I think that will afford us more time for some questions, specific questions. Thank you very much, everyone.